Hello, welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we are doing on Thursday evening. The first round has just ended, and we're doing this podcast during the second round. No offense to you second rounders. Hope there's Hall of Famers in there. Joining me from Brooklyn, New York, in Barclays Center, where he's just covered the first round of the draft, is Tim Bontemps.
I'm hiding out in Aaron Harris's office. It's the one empty room in the building. I called him and said, "Can I use your office?" I called him and I called him and said, "Can I use your office?" He said, "Is it actually open?" I said, "Yeah," and it seems like it got cleaned out. There's nothing in here, but here I sit.
It looks like you're in a prison, quite frankly.
It's what I mean. There's nothing in here. It's empty.
He feels right at home.
Joining us from Dallas, where he was at the Mavericks' very exciting draft night tonight, is Ben MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. They did have fajitas. I went with chickens. I stay away from that with meat. Did have a cookie, snuck in a cookie. Cheated in that sense, but a very exciting night. That Christian Wood deal's, I think, up to like 4 teams now. So here we go.
Yeah. All right. So we had an intriguing lottery tonight. I know there's obviously a lot of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant stuff, and we'll get to that. But we want to talk about the draft that just unfolded, specifically the lottery. I can't remember the last time that we had a surprise number one pick. Even Anthony Bennett, when the Cavs did that pick, I think it was known during that day. So Paolo Banchero was projected number 3 by all the people who I trust. I talked to Paolo's camp earlier in the day on Thursday. They thought he was going to Houston. The betting markets in Vegas, starting on Tuesday, the odds started to shrink, and then overnight, Tuesday or Wednesday night to Thursday morning, Banchero actually became the betting favorite. So I wouldn't say that Vegas knew. I think some bettors knew. From what I understand from some folks, a couple, at least one, and potentially even 2 syndicates where it's like groups of sharp bettors putting money together, I believe, got some money in. I believe our man Doug Kazarian told me they got it in at around 20-1, and that started shifting the markets. But during the day, it went sort of back. So the Magic went with Banchero. They were listening to Jeff Weltman, their general manager, or I don't know if he's president or general manager, their top basketball operations guy, listening to him to describe it. At least if you want to take him at his word, they didn't have any doubts. This was their number one guy from the start. And while he didn't come to Orlando to actually have a workout and have a private meeting in Orlando, he said they did meet with him privately earlier, and that they did a Zoom call with him, and that he did full testing, both medical and personality testing. And they said they were very comfortable. Bontemps, I'm not sure why with the number one pick you would try to run a smokescreen scheme. I would think that, unless they were trying to get some sort of offer, which I don't know. If you really like the guy at 1, take the guy at 1. I'm not sure why the Magic wanted to do a misdirection, but their misdirection worked for what that's worth.
Yeah, it was the first of a few confusing things to happen today, the way this shook out. I mean, Paolo certainly seems like a guy who could be a nice fit for Orlando. We all know they haven't exactly had the most offensively gifted team in recent years. They have a bunch of defense first players. He's got a chance to be a really intriguing offensive player. But to your point, you have the number one pick. I guess maybe they were hoping Houston would come in with some crazy offer at the last second, I guess, since Houston had a lot of interest in Paolo the whole time. But given how, generally across the board, how far ahead these 3 guys were, to me, it was sort of going to be Orlando was going to take one of those 2 guys. Oklahoma City was always going to take Chet, and Houston was always going to take whichever guy was left. And I mean, McMahon, the Rockets a lot better than me. I'd assume you'd agree with that. So yeah, this whole thing was odd from the beginning, and everybody I think will work out just fine long term, but it was pretty strange.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Rockets were probably surprised But I don't think that they were necessarily panicked or disappointed. And you can make an argument that the Rockets actually turned out to be a winner in this case because Jabari Smith, a defensively versatile guy, more of a pure shooter. You can argue he's a better fit with that young core, and honestly though, with these teams, when you're drafting 1, 2, 3, you figure fit out later. You just got to get talent in. But the Rockets, when I was down there last week.
What about 4? Do you draft for fit at 4 or do you draft for talent?
Well, apparently that's the spot where you start drafting for fit. But I will say this. We can't get on the Kings earlier this week for continuing to draft guards and then get on them today for drafting for fit. I don't know.
Well, finish what you were talking about with Jabari Smith.
Yeah, I just think that they felt like those 3 guys were kind of in a tier. I don't know what their final rankings ended up being, but it wasn't like one is clearly higher than the other than another. I think you can make an argument Jabari Smith, if Alperen Şengün is going to be a starting center moving forward for the Rockets, that Jabari Smith is actually the best fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think draft night, it's a night of heroes and goats. Draft night, it ends up mattering so much. We redraft it, we talk about it, but very rarely do we know on draft night what happens. And even the experts, sometimes they don't know. We'll grade them. I mean, I won't because I don't know the prospects.
The people who studied them will grade them.
Right. People who spend their lives studying these prospects. There's several people who work for major media outlets who basically all they do is the draft. And Jonathan Givony is our guy. And he spends 364 days building to this day every year, traveling across Europe and the Pacific Rim, much less all the United States. But you just don't know. I do think that generally the ranking of talent played out. There wasn't a guy who, at least in my mind, who was like, whoa, this guy got picked way ahead of where we thought he was going to get picked, or this guy slid way, way back. So the evaluations on the mock draft seem to have the talent in the order that the teams agreed with. Bontemps, you think Banchero is going to be the rookie of the year? You made your very early prediction of him as rookie of the year. So picking the rookie of the year,
that was Rockets. Power forward.
Listen. I think here's what I will say. I will say that he is the classic guy who will win rookie of the year. I have no idea if what he'll be like long term, but he's a guy who will come in and probably average 27 and 5 or something like that a game. Like, he's gonna have the ball in his hands all the time. He's a good passer. He's going to rack up assists. He's going to rack up rebounds. He's going to rack up points. Like, go back to Tyreek Evans, right? The year that, that class was Steph Curry and James Harden, all those guys. Tyreek Evans won rookie of the year because he averaged 25 and 5. Like, I'm not saying Paolo's not going to be really good either. Just like if you look at these guys, you look at the end of the year, no matter how many wins the Magic have, he's got the profile of a guy who's going to put up big numbers, and those guys tend to win rookie of the year.
Yeah. So Chet Holmgren goes number 2. I've been aware of Chet Holmgren for 2 or 3 years now. I've watched
just
him.
Brian. Nobody else, Tim.
Just Brian. I certainly did not know. I did not know who Paolo Banchero was 2-3 years ago. I did not know who Jaden Ivey was 3 years ago. I did know who Chet Holmgren was.
It was just a funny way to say you've been aware of him for a couple of years. That's all.
What I'm saying is that even me, who doesn't pay any attention to college or pro player or high school players, I was even aware of him. Like, I'm aware of Victor Wembanyama, who I've been watching highlights on for a year now, who was likely the number one.
That was probably the first time you watched him play was when they played against each other, right? In the under-19s?
Actually not. Actually, I think I started following. I know I don't even follow that many players on Twitter. And I think I started following Chet Holmgren on Twitter like 2019.
Wow.
So
Windhorst.
I've
Doing
watched
deep
him
research.
for a long time.
Deep research.
Well, he's from the upper Midwest. What do you want from me? So he's, one of the more intriguing prospects I've seen. And I think other people have said that. So I think there was some, I wonder if there was any doubt, Bontemps, when Jabari Smith was available at number 2 for Oklahoma City, whether they considered it all.
I doubt it. I doubt it. I thought the whole time he had the highest upside of any of these guys. And with the way the Thunder operate and swinging for the fences, which we'll get to later with the beginning of these crazy machinations the Knicks had today, Holmgren was a perfect fit with their team. They've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They've got Josh Giddey. They've got Lou Dort. They have a giant hole in the middle. Obviously, Chet Holmgren's probably not going to be a center, but he is everything this team needs. And I think he's got a chance to be a really, really good fit there and a really, really good player. And I thought, I obviously you don't draft for fit here, you draft for talent, but this was a perfect marriage of upside, fit, and talent to me for him to go second.
And he's going to play a lot of center in the NBA. And people say, "Whoa, look how skinny he is. He can't play center in the NBA." And I always go back to how many matchups are you really concerned about guys just absolutely bullying you in the post? And there's
you don't want him to guard you well Embiid. Right.
And the right. Top 2 finishers in MVP. Other than that, like, hey, how will he match up against Valanciunas in the post? I don't know, but if you're playing New Orleans and they want to take the ball out of Zion's hands and Ingram's hands and CJ's hands and run 45 post-ups, I think you can live with that. So my point is, I just don't know that being skinny necessarily means you can't play a whole lot of center in today's NBA.
Well, he's tremendous. I mean, all of his highlights you watch, his block shots are all in help defense because he's got like a 7'6" wingspan. The Thunder had 2 other picks in the lottery tonight, as it turned out, which we'll talk about in just a second. And they didn't use, for either one of them they didn't use a big on either. Was neither one of them they used on a big, so they might see Chet Holmgren as a center, as playing a lot of center for them. We'll see. Okay, let's talk about the 4th pick. So this is where a lot of the focus was on where the draft would start. There was a lot of wonder if the Kings would trade this pick. They did not. They took Keegan Murray out of Iowa, power forward, who I assume they will play alongside Domantas Sabonis. And they let Jaden Ivey go to the Pistons at 5, the beginning of what the Pistons hope is a potentially transformational night for their franchise. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be, but certainly they're very excited about it. There's a devastating graphic that was on ESPN earlier today. And I know that just for Kings fans, this is, poking you a little bit, but sorry. They talked about how in 2011, Kings took Jimmer Fredette 10th, Klay Thompson goes 11. 2012, Thomas Robinson 5th, Dame Lillard 6th. 2018, the big one, Marvin Bagley the 3rd, 2nd, Luka Doncic 3rd. And then here we have this one. And I don't know what Keegan Murray will be, but certainly this was out of the order that a lot of mock drafters had, which would have had Jaden Ivey at 4, and now he goes 5 to Detroit in what looks like a potentially really good fit alongside Cade Cunningham. Cade is bigger, so they match up, with good size. They both can handle and both can play off the ball. He was in tears. Now, from what I understand, he's an emotional kid. I think he's been known to get emotional at times. It's one of the things that's in his scouting report is that he's emotional. So maybe he cries no matter what, but he down,
cries during rom-coms.
tears pouring out of his eyes as he's getting picked by Detroit. Based on what some of the sort of stuff he said or didn't say about Sacramento earlier this week, I wonder if he cries no matter where he gets drafted, or he was just
he would have really cried if he got drafted by the Kings.
It was tears of,
not tears of joy. I listen, in fairness, with the graphic, in fairness, it is a different general manager. I don't know how many other general managers. I'd have to go back and look.
There were several.
Now, so Monty McMahon didn't make those picks. I was surprised, not that the Kings didn't draft Ivy, but that there wasn't a trade for them to make there. That's what surprised me. If they weren't going to take Ivy, I was surprised that there wasn't, whether it was the Pacers moving up, the Knicks moving up. I mean, we talked about this earlier in the week. I was surprised there wasn't some sort of move down a little lower in the lottery and get assets to do so.
Bontemps was that. What do you think about that?
I mean, look, Keegan Murray has some real fans in the draft. I mean, this is a guy who averaged 23-8 at Iowa, and I think shot 55% from the field and 40% from three. Like, he could be a big time scorer as a 3-4 for them. It could end up being a good fit. It's hard to know I've probably spent less time studying these draft prospects this year than just about any year in the past, because the finals just ended and things have been going on. So I'm not going to try to grade
you to evaluate the players.
Well, no,
I'm
but
asking you to evaluate the Kings going with fit over.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's fit over talent. Like Murray, it's not like Murray was the 10th pick in most people's mocks. He was somewhere between 4 and 6, and he went 4th. So I think what I will say though is we're talking about the Kings, who have missed the playoffs 16 years in a row. So I think it's very fair to be skeptical of what they are doing and look at Jaden Ivey and say, well, they didn't want to draft another guard because they drafted Halliburton 2 years ago and they drafted Davion Mitchell and they still have De'Aaron Fox. They didn't want to have another guard there, especially when the guy said it wouldn't be the worst outcome in the world to play in Sacramento and made it seem like he'd rather eat glass than play on the Kings. So I think it's fair to question it, but look, we could be sitting here 2 years from now and Keegan Murray could look like a star. So, we'll see what happens there. But again, this all goes back to the Kings have given us no reason to give them any benefit of the doubt over the past bunch of years. And until they start to, I think it's safe to assume they're screwing things up.
Yeah, and I like Ivy a lot. Obviously, his athleticism is ridiculous. It gets the Russ comparisons for a Troy Weaver connection. Obviously, the Ja Morant comparisons. His mom was an assistant in Memphis there during Ja's rookie year. The one question I have in terms of his fit with Cade is, I think it's hard to play off the ball in the NBA if teams are happy to let you get 3-point looks. And so, but on the other hand, 3-point shooting is one thing that you can develop. You cannot develop that kind of athleticism. You either have that or you don't. We've seen plenty of guys who came in the league as questionable or even poor 3-point shooters and have developed to at least being good spot up shooters. I think if that's going to be a great fit, he's going to have to develop into being at least a good spot up 3-point shooter.
I'll point out that the Thunder tonight took 2 guys named Jalen Williams. So that should be fun. Okay, so Detroit has to be thrilled with that pick. Now let's talk about what happened, at the 11th spot, which, there's obviously other lottery picks there. We'll talk about them a lot in the coming weeks, summer league, et cetera. But I think Shadon Sharp being interesting, going to, a high upside, but high development player going to Portland, who kept their pick.
Can I say something about that real quick?
Yeah.
He was the number 1 prospect in high school before he went to Kentucky. He then didn't play at Kentucky. I don't think it's a coincidence. Our guy, Mike Schmitz, who now is with the Blazers in his first draft there, drafted Shadon Sharp. Like, that guy, to me, if of all these teams in the top, after the top 3 picks, I don't know if Shadon Sharp's going to work out or not, but on his pedigree, he's got gigantic upside. So I loved Portland, even though they've got Dame. Obviously, they're trying to win now. I love that swing for them, because if that kid works out, he is a huge athlete on the wing who can score. Like, that's the kind of swing. If I'm one of these teams like at Indiana or Sacramento, like these teams that are struggling to find a real star player, I just thought that was a great move by the Portland to take a kid with massive upside, and we'll see if it works out or not. But given where they're at, they don't, to me, have a clear future going forward. I really like them doing that, not trying to do something to win immediately with a team that's not going to be able to win anyway.
Well, they just traded for Jeremy Grant the day before. So
they did both. They didn't need to use
exactly
to do their win now move, and then they were able to take a high upside swing at 7.
Well, I knew that he was a bit of a mystery man when Kevin Pelton was on earlier this week, and he was using his AAU stats to try to grade him. Okay, let's talk about the Knicks at 11. Cutting the price of your wireless bill feels good, really good. Actually, it feels great. You should try it. So cut your bill by switching to Straight Talk Wireless, now offering our $45 Silver Unlimited plan. That's unlimited high-speed data and 5 gigabytes of hotspot for just $45 a month. Get nationwide 5G on America's largest, most dependable networks. So why pay a whole lot for your data when you can get unlimited for a whole lot less? The $45 Silver Unlimited plan from Straight Talk. Straight Talk Wireless. No contract, no compromise. With the safe return of live events, you can actually be there to catch all the action in person with Vivid Seats. That's right. Every alley-oop, every one-timer, every sideline grab can be experienced live. And with Vivid Seats rewards, you can earn rewards like free tickets. All you have to do is collect stamps, redeem, and repeat. It's that easy. From upper level to courtside, Vivid Seats has you covered for all the events that matter to you. So grab your tickets today and cheer your favorite team from the stands. Visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, life happens live. The Knicks had hoped to trade up for Jaden Ivey. I don't know if they really got anywhere for that. I knew that a couple of things that I knew before we go over exactly what the Knicks did. And I'm going to read it, Bontemps, even though Bontemps, with a little bit of help from me, tracked it down. So I'm afraid you might go too fast, Tim. So I'm going to read it in just a second.
Especially he's chugging like regular Pepsi.
Listen, it's been a long day, McMahon. This Knicks trade, these Knicks trades seriously broke my brain. I spent an hour trying to figure this out.
When I heard him crack it, I didn't think it was a Pepsi. And I'll say, if I drank a Pepsi this late at night, I'd be up till dawn.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So just a couple of things. The Knicks, if they couldn't trade up, were interested in trading back the entire day. They were having talks with several teams behind them for days. From what I understand, they were calling teams behind them looking to move down. So one thing that I think I can say with relative confidence is whatever the Knicks thought about their options at 11, they were not enamored with them going into the draft. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that was my feel. The second thing I'll say is that clearing cap space seems to be a big priority. Going into tonight, it seemed like clearing cap space was something they definitely wanted to do, which we knew that they would have interest in that. So that seemed to be a goal for tonight. Maybe not walking away with a great prospect was the goal. Maybe this was the exact part of their strategy, but they definitely did not prioritize drafting at 11. So over the course of a few minutes, they made 2 trades. First, they traded 3. They
actually made 3 trades.
You're right. They did make 3 trades. Okay. But essentially one was a 3-team trade. So they traded the 11th pick to Oklahoma City, who had the 12th pick. Now, Cleveland and Oklahoma City were eyeing each other throughout the last few days. I think both wanting the same prospect, Osman Jang, who's French but played in the Australian League last year, a 6'10" project wing player. The Thunder were wondering if the Cavs were going to get to 11. The Cavs were wondering if the Thunder would take Jang ahead of them. And I think they both had, I know they both had talks with the Knicks throughout the day. So it was the Thunder who do the deal. But instead of swapping with the Knicks, they kept the 12th pick and they gave 3 future firsts. All 3 of them technically are 2023 first round picks. I don't know how many of them are actually going to convey in 2023. There was a Denver Nuggets 2023 pick that was top 14 protected, lottery protected. A Detroit Pistons 2023 first round pick that is top 18 protected, and a Washington Wizards 2023 first round pick that is top 14 protected. And if those don't convey, yep.
I was just going to say this was not a bowl you overhaul for the 11th pick.
We will save our analysis for the end of the announcement. So
okay.
The Knicks traded 3.
We're going to be here for an hour with the announcement.
I want you to tell you the Knicks traded 3 firsts.
No, I know
to move off the 11th pick. None of the 3 firsts can be in the top 11 next year. I don't even think over the year after. These picks roll way off. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or
a few minutes later, when Charlotte was on the clock with the 13th pick, the Thunder make back-to-back picks. They take Jang, and then they take their first Jalen Williams of the night. a wing player, or actually he's a guard. If I'm not wrong. And then now Charlotte's on the clock. Charlotte has 2 picks at 13 and 15. They need a big man, and they know that the Cavs, who have a bunch of bigs, are not going to take a center. So they know that they know that they're going to get a center that they want. So they trade the 13th pick to New York. What does New York give them for the 13th pick? They give them a first-round pick that they had just gotten from Oklahoma City, the Denver first-round pick for next year, top 14 protected, and 4 second-rounders, which I don't even know what those 4 were, but I know that the Knicks had 3 in next year's draft. They might have been all from 3 of them might have been from that. So Charlotte, for the 13th pick, gets a 2023 protected first from Denver and 4 second-rounders for Jalen Duren, he was a Knick for 15 seconds, and he gets shipped to Detroit. Detroit came in. Duren was regarded as what would you say, guys? He was a top 10 pick on a lot of boards. Some
10-ish.
people had him going
a lottery pick.
Yeah.
Mid to late lottery.
Some people had him going to San Antonio. I saw at number 9.
Yeah, anywhere from 9 to 14.
So Detroit took the 2025 Milwaukee Bucks pick that they had gotten the day before for Jeremy Grant from the Trailblazers. God, I'm even getting confused, even though I know what it is, but there's so many team names. They only had the pick for 24 hours. They send it to New York. So New York emerges. Oh, and the Knicks offload Kemba Walker in the trade. Kemba Walker is on the books for $9.1 million next year.
Can I sum this up in one line, Brian?
Go ahead. Well, wait a minute. So at the end of everything, out goes the number 11 pick, Kemba Walker, and his $9 million salary for next year, and 4 second-round picks. That went out the door for the Knicks. In the door for the Knicks, 3 first-round picks, all of them protected. And that's it. 3 first-round picks is what they get.
It's likely that Detroit and or Washington won't end up being a first-round pick. Those are the picks they got from Houston.
But the Washington one rolls over to like 2026.
They both roll over that far.
Yeah, they're both
that far.
It's like the protection gets a little lighter and a little lighter. You know, maybe they get
I don't
a first
think you
rounder,
can say something with 3 or 4 years away likely won't be a first-round pick. But if your point is it's not a premium pick, if your point is that those aren't premium picks, that's a fair statement.
I said I'm willing to bet one or the other they won't end up getting a first-round pick out of it. Again, those are the picks they got for the 16th pick last year when Houston took Şengün.
When you say they, you mean the Thunder. When the Thunder picks of the
Thunder,
the
Thunder got two. A trade we panned at the time because we didn't like the value they got for the 16th pick.
Yeah, and I think
at least I panned.
I'd have to look at the Thunder's stockpile of picks, which we don't have time to go through that whole thing.
These are the worst picks they
right.
Those are the picks they have.
Right. I was gonna say I would think
they
say
among the. I mean, I'm editing.
Okay,
they're among the worst picks they have.
I'm pretty sure they're the worst. They're at minimum among the worst. I mean, we had this conversation last year about the Şengün trade, whereas like Şengün was a highly rated prospect who fell to 16, and they got 2 mediocre to bad firsts for that pick. And now they turned around, to their credit, they turned around and used them with another mediocre to bad pick, this pick from Denver, to get the 11th pick in this year's draft and keep the 12th pick and get 2 picks in the lottery to get guys they want. I will say,
one thing I want to point out about the Knicks, I forgot to say this. Mm-hmm. In addition to getting the 3 firsts, they also moved off $5 million they would have had to pay the 11th pick and the $9 million salary of Kemba Walker. So they now have cleared in the neighborhood of $20 million in cap space for next week.
I think it's a little
$15 million. You turned 5 and 9 into 20 somehow.
No, I said total cap space.
I think Bobby Marks had him at 18, and then that's not incling the hold for Robinson.
I'm sorry. You were saying total cap space. I'm sorry. I thought you were saying that's what they traded in that deal. Got it. I was confused by what you were saying. My bad. Yeah, I mean,
so
look,
you said
to me,
Bontemps, you said you had a theory about what they're doing.
Well, I mean, it's a much less galaxy brain theory than what the Knicks did today, which was pretty galaxy brain all the way around. But to me, you have to look at this and think one of two things. The Knicks are trying to sign Kyrie Irving. The Knicks are trying to sign Jalen Brunson. It's hard to look at this and think of anything else. They now have all these extra picks, as you mentioned, between not paying the 11th pick, not paying Kemba. It's $14 million they're now not paying. They have 3 extra first-round picks that, frankly, aren't very good picks. I mean, yeah, maybe it works out where they're good picks. They're probably not good picks. Those are the kind of picks you get if you're trying to maneuver around like the Thunder did today to get back in the draft or to do something else, right? If the Knicks are able to shed another $20 million in salary, they're in prime position to just offer a max contract to Kyrie Irving. And they're the one team, as we've talked about multiple times, and I see your face, McMahon. It's a fair face to make. Everyone knows my position. I would not be wanting to pay Kyrie Irving. However, as I have said repeatedly since this whole Kyrie thing came up, the Knicks are the one team of all these teams that are involved, whether it's, all the teams that Adrian put out in the list today, the Knicks are the one team that have the ability to clear the space to sign him. And by these moves today, if they want to do it, they've at least given themselves the ability to, and they've also given themselves the ability, as McMahon knows full well, to offer Jalen Brunson potentially as much money as they want and make it really, really expensive for Dallas to keep him.
Okay, let me ask you this, McMahon. So first off, let's just acknowledge that the Knicks and Jalen Brunson, I don't know I've ever seen a team more attached to a free agent ever.
Yeah.
Where
I mean,
you have
deep blood and essentially family ties.
So
not essentially literal family ties.
No, Rick Brunson's literal family ties.
They
I'm
just
talking
hired
Leon
his
Rose
dad
is
to-
like,
right.
yeah, Leon Rose is essentially his second father figure.
to
Yeah.
go
Sam
over,
Rose is one of Jalen Brunson. Sam Rose, Leon's son, is one
hold
of
on.
Jalen's agents.
Whoa. Too much talking. Rick Brunson.
That's
Only
what we do
Brian
on
can talk.
podcasts.
Only Brian can talk.
Well, I mean, you guys are talking over each other and you're just assuming that people know this. I don't believe that the average fan knows that Sam
McMahon
Rose
was
is his agent.
Okay, they read every word I write. I've written this. Every word.
Every syllable.
Okay.
Even
I
the ones I don't know
apologize
how to
if I'm being
pronounce.
repetitive. I'm just trying. Sometimes Bontemps, you talk a little much and a little fast. Sorry.
McMahon was talking.
All right. Sam Rose, who is
Wow.
Leon Rose's son,
Shots
is
fired.
one of Jalen Brunson's agents. Jalen Brunson's father, Rick Brunson, is now assistant coach. And there's
For
all
the
kinds
third
of
time on a Tibbs staff and has known Tibbs since he was in high school. And then Leon Rose, the Knicks president, obviously, longtime agent, was Jalen Brunson's original agent.
he
who
probably
negotiated.
held Jalen within days of his birth. He probably was holding Jalen.
100%.
So
And also negotiated this contract where, despite the fact that Jalen Brunson is coming off of his rookie contract, he is an unrestricted free agent because, and Bobby Marks can tell you the exact specifics, instead of I forgot exactly what it was, instead of however the way the fourth year was structured.
it's
Well,
a
they
4-year
either could have
contract.
they either could have made him a restricted free agent or had him as a 4-year unrestricted free agent, right?
Something
Wasn't
to
it a
do
team
with, and
option?
I forget the exact,
So,
the
similar
option
thing-
or, yeah.
A similar thing happened for Nikola Jokic. When Nikola Jokic came out as a second-round pick, the Nuggets signed him to a 4-year contract. The 4th year was a team option. If they had let him opt out after the 3rd year, he was a restricted free agent. If they had let him go for the full 4 years, he'd have been unrestricted. They got to after 3 years, they were like, boy, this Jokic guy is pretty darn good. We could get him next year for like $2 million, or we could sign him now and pay him $20 million. That would be less advantageous, but he won't be unrestricted. So we know we control him. So the Nuggets were like, let's sign him now and give him a big raise, maybe early. The Mavericks had the same option, and for various reasons, and not even necessarily wrong reasons. And also because it was limited how much they could pay Jalen Brunson. Actually, it wasn't. They had full bird rights.
So
Right.
the Mavericks going into this year, they could have given him an extension for 4 years, 55 mil, right? It's the same extension Dorian Finney-Smith signed at the trade deadline. They did not offer that extension to Jalen Brunson.
But they could have
until-
signed him to a new contract last summer. Is that correct?
4-year, $55 million extension. The Mavericks at the time questioned whether he was worth that, thought he was maybe more of a full mid-level type of guy.
They made
Brunson,
a mistake.
a $50+ million mistake. He might get more than twice that. Brunson went to them in January and said, hey, I've been starting. We're winning now. Like, I feel good. I want to be here. If you put that extension on the table, I'll sign it. They said no. They didn't put it on the table until after the trade deadline. And that was because if something would have come up, if a star would have become available, they wanted, and they understood if a star becomes available, there's two guys everyone's going to ask for, Finney Smith and Brunson. If you extend them, you can't trade them. They didn't want to be handcuffed. Well, that obviously ended up being a mistake.
Now they're going to be handcuffed in a different way.
Well, and here's the thing. The Mavericks now are either going to pay Jalen Brunson a lot. And I think the contract would end up being 5 years, maybe with a player option, 115, somewhere in that range.
I think it's going to be higher. I think it's going to be higher than that, isn't it?
Maybe higher. They're the only ones who can give him 5 years. They do have, full bird rights, so they can go as high. The Mavericks, I would say, are still, certainly Jalen Brunson is still firmly in their plans. I would say optimistic, but this is not, maybe it ends up being a second that, free agency opens type of deal. It's not a done deal right now, though.
What do you think they have a walk away? Do you think there's a walk away number for them?
I don't know. I think there used to be, and they've blown by that, brother.
I mean, this is set up.
Yeah.
This is, like I said,
Well, how
what
much
the Knicks
more
did
can the
today.
Knicks? Now the Knicks have these first round picks, so in theory,
Can they
Well,
dump Nerlens Noel?
I mean,
they can dump a lot of things. They've got these picks now.
So here's the thing about the Knicks. Okay. So here's the thing about the Knicks, because to me, this whole thing the Knicks did, I mean, it easily became outside the top of the draft, the most important thing, or the most interesting thing, I should say, that we saw here. So the Knicks roster now is basically a ton of guys who are in the last year of their deal. So they got rid of Kemba Walker. So all these guys have team options for after they are guys who are under contract for 22-23 who have a team option for the following year. Derrick Rose, 14.5 million. Alec Burks for 10, Nerlens Noel for 9, and then some of their young guys are after that. But those three guys plus Cam Reddish, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million in expiring contracts for those four guys. If they can get rid of, and that doesn't count for Evan Fournier, who's making 18 by himself with an extra year. So among those five guys, there's $60 million in salary. If they trade 20 of it, they're in a position to offer a max deal to somebody. So
okay. So maybe they want Jalen Brunson, and maybe they just want optionality, because maybe Jalen Brunson stays with the Mavericks on a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at the lay of the land right now. Do we honestly believe that the Knicks want Kyrie Irving? And more than do you want Kyrie Irving? Let's realize that if you get Kyrie Irving, it's not just Kyrie Irving the player. It's Kyrie Irving the player who is expecting a large, obviously a very large contract.
Mm-hmm.
It's both, kind of like Harden. You're not just trading for Harden, you're trading for Harden and his demands. Do you honestly believe that the New York
his
Knicks,
unreliability?
Well, here's what I'll say. I'm going to start off this by saying I would not do this. I would not sign Kyrie Irving. I would not give up assets to clear cap space to sign Kyrie Irving. My thoughts on Kyrie Irving are well known. However, if I'm the Knicks, who spend all their time focused on the team over here, like they do a lot, they've been completely overshadowed by the team over here for the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. They saw Kevin and Kyrie come to the Nets and not the Knicks. The Knicks have not been good. You have a front office that's under a lot of pressure to be good, right? You've got Kyrie, who is mad and clearly is trying to get some leverage to get paid by the Nets. He's talking about, maybe there's talk, maybe he's going to go to Lakers for $6 million. Well, he could go across the river, play for the Knicks, become a god in the city. Because if Kyrie went and played for the Knicks, he'd be the most popular athlete in New York City instantly. And
touch him, man.
And you've got Tibbs, who has had a ton of success with small guards, would just let Kyrie run his stuff on offense. And if you're the Knicks, who have been desperately trying to get a star, you can get a star who a lot of guys in the league want to play with. Now, I am saying all that while saying at the beginning and the end, me personally, I wouldn't be in the Kyrie Irving business. However, for a Knicks team that has not been able to get stars, that has struck out repeatedly, that could be feeling some heat to get some players now after the way last year went, I could see how they could get there. And all I'm saying is these moves they made today, the only way it makes sense is if they clear 20, 25, $30 million and they go try to sign somebody for a max. Because otherwise they took the 11th pick in the draft and turned it into a bunch of crappy picks.
Let me ask you this. Would you rather pay Jalen Brunson $25 million a year or Kyrie Irving called an opt-in and trade? And so you've got him at 36.
Kyrie Irving $25 million a year.
I agree with you 100%. And it's not like, I'm sorry. Kyrie torched things in Cleveland, torched things in Boston.
Listen,
torched things in Brooklyn. Like the next team who trades for him deserves to get torched.
To me, what I'm doing, if I'm a team that's clearing out space that's in a glamour market, and I guess the Knicks count. It's never really helped them.
The Knicks definitely count.
I know I'm making a joke, but they don't know. It doesn't ever appear that way.
That's when she stay.
I'm trying to wait for Durant. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
And then Durant says, "Hey, I want to play with Kyrie again."
Well, I mean, look, I don't think there's any way on God's green earth that the Nets would ever get Durant to the Knicks. I don't think there's a literal way they would ever do that trade, no matter how much stuff the Knicks had to trade. However, I will say this again, and I'm just playing devil's advocate on this, so we're not all saying the same thing. But if you're the Knicks and you get Kyrie Irving for essentially, let's say they need another first, maybe two of these firsts to move off of some of this salary. You then have a star on the Knicks who, again, guys around the league like Kyrie Irving. So maybe they could then trade for a second star, and then they have two stars on the team. Again, I'm just saying, I could see least part-time. From this scenario, look, I could just see from the way this is played out today that I could see how you could talk yourself into doing this. And it sure seems like they're gearing up to get max cap space. And there's one guy to go sign.
So theory. the Knicks still have the Mavericks pick next year. Is that correct? McMahon?
I'm going to look up the Knicks pick situation while we're talking.
And so they just picked up 3 additional firsts tonight. So that means that the Knicks own all of their picks plus 4 others. Granted, not all of them are super interesting, but that means that they, I think,
the Knicks have no picks outgoing. The Knicks have no outgoing picks, and they have, and they have those 3. They have those 3 firsts.
So they can trade 7 firsts if they would have to. Because you can trade up to 7 years in advance. You can trade every other year. And then they have the 3 extra ones that they can trade if they want them.
Actually, yeah, you're right. It's 4 extra ones. It's the 3 next year plus the Dallas pick.
Yeah, and look, I mean, they've got, if they wanted to put RJ Barrett in a trade, I think there'd be a lot of interest there. I mean, they've got things to put in trades for sure.
By the way, so the Rockets may not have been happy about Banchero going to number 1, but how do the Rockets feel about the Brooklyn Nets draft that they control for the next 7 years?
Ecstatic.
Well, I'll tell you what too. The Rockets at 17 got a kid, Tari Eason, who is seen by many people to be one of the elite defensive players in the draft. And given they have a bunch of guys who like to score, not necessarily defend, is a pretty nice fit on their team. I think with him,
with him and Jabari. They also got Ty
Washington
at the end of the draft, who people think is another high upside,
very
high
Rockets
ceiling
pick.
type player.
Yeah, I don't think the Rockets were heartbroken about the Banchero thing. They got one of the top 3 players in the draft, whatever it fell. But as far as the Brooklyn thing goes, dude, they made that trade in part because they were like, okay, we've seen James's star partnerships. You know the history with KD, you know the history with Kyrie, and they kind of felt like
made a bet on the future.
There could be some
that is what Raphael
Stone coming this way.
Raphael Stone said it 15 minutes after he made the trade. He said this was all about the picks because the quote unquote player haul that they got was less than impressive.
Yeah,
and he
they have
was
nothing to show for players.
he was very clear what they were doing.
Well, and there's
And-
certainly other parts of that trade they messed up, but they didn't mess that part up.
Well, they let Jared Allen go for free, which still is
Right.
well, not for
And
free.
but
They got a first round pick.
and and I wrote the story that ran today. Basically, what they were doing was stocking up on picks, believing some of those could end up being, lottery, even high lottery picks down
Sure.
the road.
Like the
And
last
by
time the
way,
Nets did this.
Yeah, the fact that this year was 17 was a huge bonus. And then they were bottoming out. Their thing was, okay, yeah, Jared Allen's a good player. Great. We might win 29 games with him and draft 8. What the hell does that do
Okay.
for anybody?
That's fine. I still think it would be nice to have Jared Allen right now, but it's not a catastrophic mistake. Let's move past that. So, all right. So the Kyrie, let me go over a couple more things in this draft. Philadelphia, I thought made,
Grand slam trade.
for the week leading up to the draft, they were shopping the number 23 pick and Danny Green, who had I think $10 million guaranteed. Together,
Well, his contract is going to be guaranteed now that he was in this trade. They had the option to either cut him or trade him for somebody, and they traded
Right.
him for somebody really good.
So they got DeAnthony Melton from the Grizzlies. By the way, the Grizzlies, as they have done now 3 years in a row, traded up for a pick. And the Grizzlies draft really well. So they
drafted.
they traded up kind of twice. They traded 2 late firsts to move into the teens. And then they got the Philly pick for DeAnthony Melton to move back in. So they kind of traded up twice. So they still came out of the draft with 2 firsts in tonight. And we'll see. They drafted a couple of guys that I don't know much about. You have to see Jonathan Gavoni about that. But I didn't know much about Des Bane 2 years ago. So
This is true.
Well, Jake LaRavia from Wake is a pretty interesting power forward. And the other guy that drafted David Roddy was actually featured in Kevin Arnovitz's pretty interesting article on the Phoenix Suns and their belief that the draft is basically not something you should pay attention to. So I would go read Kevin's piece because it was very interesting. And there was actually a lot of talk about David Roddy in that piece. So you can learn about it.
David Roddy's from Colorado State. Is that right?
That's correct.
Colorado State. He's a Ram.
Okay.
And
Now he's
I'll
a
say
Grizzly.
this, Zach, there you go. Zach Kleiman. I think you give him benefit of the doubt based on it's not a long track record, but his track record is when he's targeted guys in the draft, Bane obviously being an example, Xavier Tillman.
Didn't they trade up for Brandon Clark?
Brandon Clark being another example. Zaire
Did
Williams.
they trade up for him? I'm trying to remember.
They did. They did. They had they didn't trade up much. They traded up like a spot or two because they had the Jazz's pick from the Conley deal, and Brandon Clark was technically, quote unquote, a Thunder pick.
Right.
So
yeah, that's right.
So this is
the
4
Thunder got
years in a row.
Beasley, they got
It's
Clark.
every year Zach Kleiman
This
moved
is-
up.
This
since
is what he
he's been
does. He
Yeah.
moves up. He finds the guys he wants. He moves up and gets them. And again, so far so good on his track record with that.
That sound has to make you smile. It's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big business, so upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility. Shopify has the tools and resources that make it easy for any business to succeed, from down the street to around the globe. Reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. Synchronize your online and in-person sales. Gain insights as you grow with detailed reporting, conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. So go to shopify.com/hoop, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/hoop right now. Shopify.com/hoop. Starting your own small business can be a total roller coaster. Between all the ups and downs, twists and turns, highs and lows, comes the actual business side of your business, which can really throw you for a loop. Luckily, with QuickBooks, you can get paid, run payroll, and know where your business stands from the start. So no matter how bumpy the ride gets, you can always stay on track. New business? No problem. Success starts with Intuit QuickBooks. Learn more at QuickBooks.com. QuickBooks Payroll, QuickBooks Payments, and QuickBooks Online Account required. These are just some of the notes that I wrote down. So I think coming out, Detroit feels like, if you look at where Detroit is, they're, the Jeremy Grant trade, initially you felt a little weird about it because they prioritized getting cap space, but the pick they flipped immediately for a lottery pick the next day. That ended up working out really well. Maybe they knew they were going to be able to get that. Maybe they were in talks all along with Charlotte and felt okay about that. But.
Well, and the other thing to say about the Pistons too there, Brian, is there's been a lot of talk about the Pistons and DeAndre Ayton, right? And they take the 25th pick, they turn it into Jalen Duren, who is a center, and who is a guy Troy Weaver, by all accounts, including Adrian's, really, really liked. So you would think they're probably not going to turn around and go after another center in free agency. However, they are a team, even though they did draft Jaden Ivey, that has been linked a lot to Jalen Brunson and has a ton of money to spend. So they're another team.
Yeah,
that could
they've also
so
been
they
throwing
did
Colin
reduce.
Sexton.
They reduced
and
their cap,
Miles Bridges too.
They reduced their cap space by, let's see, about 14 million off the top of my head, by getting the second first round pick.
But they still got it well north of 30.
Okay, I know, but there was a concept that they could do two significant free agents, and so now, but
I mean, they could still have $45 million if they turned down a couple of options. I think they could have had before these trades today as much as like 58 million in space. So they could still have a lot of space.
The thing with the Pistons and Ayton, to me, if it's not a sign and trade, why wouldn't the Suns? I know the Suns seem prepared to move on from Ayton. They can't do it if they get nothing in return. Why wouldn't they just match that and you're shopping them until you can trade them 6 months from now?
I know that there were harsh feelings, and Monty Williams, who's one of the classiest guys you'll ever meet, kind of threw some mud at 8-8 and late. The executives I'm talking to do not think that Ayton necessarily is going to leave. They think that he could still be back. I wouldn't say it's like 90%, but they don't think that door is closed.
Okay, I think if it's not a sign and trade, they have to, even if it's a matching situation. You cannot pick a guy number one and let him walk for nothing 4 years later when he's been a good player.
You would think that would be true. And there's been a lot of attempts by media and fans to find sign and trades for Ayton that make sense. And I've seen a lot of people's ideas, and I haven't seen a lot that I was like, yeah, that could happen.
Well, one of them that did make some sense was Jeremy Grant. Now that's not on the table.
And I didn't even love that one either, to be honest with you.
I'm not saying I loved it, but at least you could sort of rationalize it.
Yeah. Well, one of them that is kind of interesting, Minnesota. I got to evaluate everything they did. Minnesota moved around tonight. They traded twice in the first round. I got to evaluate everywhere Minnesota is. I'm not really quite there yet under Tim Connolly.
Well, they
have
one
been
thing that was interesting about them was they've been looking for centers, and they went and drafted Walker Kessler from Auburn, who had some crazy shot blocking numbers at Auburn. And, in theory, if they've been looking for centers, he could slot in there next to Karl Towns. You could play Karl Towns a power forward, and you could try to roll ahead with that, which is an interesting situation.
Right. Well, I think Pelton said he's one of the highest block rate centers he's had in his database.
Yeah. He had crazy block numbers this year.
Okay. So before we go, I just want to try to get Bontemps and I spent like a half hour or 45 minutes before the draft tonight, just trying to process the situation that the Nets are in.
I can't believe you talked to Bontemps outside of the podcast.
I had to coax him through it, McMahon. It was a challenge.
You have a high pain threshold.
Here's all I'm going to say. When the Nets took a hard line with Kyrie Irving. And by the way, they're not offering him a max contract. It doesn't mean that they're not offering him any contract. It's not like they're offering him a 2-year minimum. They're offering him something. It's
Isn't
just not
Kyrie
the-
part of management? Why didn't he just give himself whatever he wants?
Well, he tried to get into his office and it was all dusty and cobwebby because he hadn't been in there.
Oh, that's
so
not where
long.
Bontemps is right now?
Yeah, you in Kyrie's office, Bontemps? No, Kyrie's office.
I'm in the
I'm sure has
I'm in the Nets PR office, so you could
Right.
make some jokes about that.
So when the Nets started this process, they knew that there was a potential for there to be loggerheads, an impasse, whatever word you want to use. And they knew that Durant was going to be sitting there. It wasn't like this all snuck up on them. They knew that there was a risk that Kyrie would rattle the saber, such as it is. And they knew that managing Durant was going to be part of this. Why are you laughing at me?
There's loggerheads and sabers being rattled. Loggerheads, when you first said it, I thought it was talking about somebody who enjoyed a ice cold beer. Bontemps is a loggerhead for sure.
It's
I
when,
can
it's
relate.
when two logs bang together, buddy.
I love watching McMahon's face as you go through a soliloquy. It's one of my favorite things about doing this pod. It's great.
It was better off when we didn't see each other. That's all I'm gonna say. I had way more fun.
I love looking at that perfectly. How do you pronounce the COIFFID? Coiffed?
Coiffure.
Quaff.
Yeah, your perfect little moosed hairdo. I love looking at it.
It's 11:57 Eastern time, and Windhorst looks like he came off the golf course, strolled into the studio, ready to go.
I want you to know that while you guys were sleeping and enjoying life's dreams, I was working. I had 13 television hits before midday today. All right,
man, I got a super small little violin here. The super small little violin here.
Well, you're acting like I'm almost
as sympathetic to Wendy's plight as I am to Kyrie's.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so they knew that Durant was going to be an issue. I think that the way people process it as they're seeing like this update, they feel like there's a crisis, and certainly it's a difficult situation, but the Nets are aware of what they were going to do. And so Kyrie, to me, from my vantage point, and please disagree with me, gents, I feel like it's Kyrie who's thrashing around, not the Nets who are thrashing around. But the Nets have a fragile situation because if Durant is turned off by how this comes out, then they got a real problem.
Yeah,
so,
and the Nets, like the Nets are just so all in on this because like blow it up and all you're doing is building up the Rockets. It's you're right back into the same situation of, hey, look how great the Celtics are. Thank you, Nets. And it'd be right back in that same situation. So like you talk about they have not had a single bit of control of this situation since they agreed that, hey, taking on Kyrie and his talent is worth it with KD coming along with him. I mean, that goes back to literally the second it happened, and they said, oh, sure, we'll sign DeAndre Jordan, who's washed up to a 4-year, $40 million deal. That'd be great. And then, they go and they do the Harden thing. That blows up in their face.
Don't forget about the coach. They knocked the coach out.
They knocked the coach. There you go. Because he dared to start Jared Allen over DeAndre Jordan. I mean, could you imagine that awful decision? Jeez.
I know we're getting a chance to let McMahon flog his favorite target, who is DeAndre Jordan. However, the real moment,
I don't make things up.
I'm just messing with you. You're correct. The real moment, though, when this ended for the Nets, everything you said is right. But the real moment where they lost control of this was in mid-September or mid-December, I should say, when they let Kyrie come back. That was when everything changed, because when they put down the hard line in October that we're going to either be all in or all out, and you're either going to be vaccinated or not, and you're either going to play every game or not. They were they had the best record in Eastern Conference in mid-December. And the second they said, Kyrie, come on down, playing road games, bring on the circus. That's when Harden was like, get me out of here. That's when everything went to hell. And that's when all their leverage over the situation went away. And while you are right, Brian, in that Kyrie clearly is trying to get paid, the Nets are also thrashing around here because, to McMahon's point, if Kyrie decides I'm going to go sign for the Knicks, or I'm going to go sign for the tax MLE with the Lakers or whatever, if he just leaves, then Kevin Durant, who knows what he's going to want to do, but their team's not going to be good. They might have to try to trade him, or he might want to try to get traded. The whole thing becomes a huge mess. And the truth is, whether we think that anybody wants to be wedded to Kyrie Irving or not, they put themselves in a situation where they have to be because they don't have any other choice.
It's a toxic marriage, and divorce would be devastating for both sides.
Yeah, that's exactly
well
it.
said. And I would say that the Nets had to realize, I mean, they had to discuss this. If they didn't have a discussion with Durant or his representation before this started, they'd be in complete dereliction of duty. And I'm sure I know more than I can say. What do you want me to say? I mean, they had to feel where Kevin Durant was before they did this. What'd you say?
I said, we want you to say what you know.
Yeah. Well, all I'm going to say is it's not like this wasn't foreseen.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
but
the other thing I'll add to just to come back around to the Knicks. If you want to ask why the Knicks would want to sign Kyrie Irving, this is not with any reporting, to be clear. I'm not reporting the Knicks are going to try and sign Kyrie at all. But having lived in New York for a long time, having covered this basketball in the city for a long time, I would not downplay the fact that if the Knicks signed Kyrie Irving, it would send the Nets into a nuclear inferno. And that James Dolan, I think, would be pretty happy if he could send the Nets into a nuclear inferno. So again,
I
don't know what the Knicks were doing today. I don't know what the Knicks were doing today, but they have at least set themselves up with the possibility of signing this guy. And if they did, it would create all kinds of absolute chaos. So, we'll see what happens.
But would it make the Knicks cool again?
Let me ask you this. If Kyrie Irving picks up, I didn't hear that line. Sorry. What'd you say, McMahon?
I said, would it make the Knicks cool again?
No. Ask Durant. If Kyrie picks up his option for $37 million, which has been hinted today by Shams Charania from The Athletic, who generally has been reporting Kyrie's side of events for months. Shams implied today that Kyrie intended to pick up his option and then ask for a trade. If Kyrie picks up his option for the $37 million, which is what any rational person would do, right?
If he wants to, especially if he wants to be traded, because you're not going to do what? Go sign for the taxpayer mid-level?
Rationality is not what I would say for
pay
Kyrie
cut
here.
Okay, we're right. It doesn't make any sense for him to take a $30 million pay cut. Number one, why would the Nets trade him? Number two, once he picks up that option, his bank account is obviously way better off, but his personal options get much smaller.
I mean,
the Lakers the Lakers can't acquire him if he's making $37 million.
Why would the Nets trade him? Because you can't keep him if you cannot keep him if he knows that there's another team that he wants to go to that's willing to. You cannot keep him. He will not show up, and if he does show up, it will be
that
a
has
total
never happened
circus.
before. Him not showing up, that's never happened before.
So why?
It also hasn't happened. It's also happened with another guy that's on his team, by the way, who is not actually played for them yet.
You would rather pay the guy $36 million to be a total pain in the ass than to get whatever value you can salvage?
My point is Kyrie's leverage is by opting out. Once Kyrie opts in.
You could also say he opts in and then looks at it and says, if I play one more year with the Nets and I actually show up and play 65 games next year and I'm good, then I could sign. There's going to be a ton of teams with cap space next summer and I'll sign for a bunch of money.
And I think at this point, that's a brokered compromise the Nets would be happy to sign up for.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. Like, I think if he opts in, that might be exactly what happens. But again, like all this other stuff is fine. I just think to me, the biggest thing to come out of tonight is as of this morning, he didn't have a realistic option to go somewhere else in free agency, other than if you want to say he's going to sign for $6 million, which again, he gave up $18 million this year. Maybe he'll give up 30. If anybody in the league would do it, it'd probably be this guy. But now the Knicks are in position to at least theoretically sign the guy.
All right.
So
Well, then I assume opt out, Kyrie, opt out. I want to see it. I want to see that opt out. File the paperwork.
we'll
we'll be
find out
talking
on
more
June
about that.
29th.
Well, I hope he doesn't have James Harden's fax machine, because that thing doesn't work when it comes to these type of decisions.
Woj reported this week that Harden is actually going to opt in and then maybe sign a short extension, which makes a lot more sense than signing the full extension. But I had this vision because, supposedly the paperwork had been done and then he didn't send it, or he didn't sign it, I should say. I can see him like going through his house. Where was that paperwork for my $40 million option? I knew I had it a few months ago. He's looking all over the place for it.
Well, and by the way, given Adrian reported that the Sixers are on Kyrie's list of teams he would like Nets to consider in the sign and trade, the truly funniest outcome in all of this would be if Kyrie and Harden got swapped for each other. He got sent back to Brooklyn and Kyrie got sent to Philly, and the entire world, again, Kyrie signs with the Nets and with the Knicks, or if him and James somehow got traded with each other, those are the two scenarios where the world would just melt.
Yeah, but Daryl's not giving up his.
Listen,
you're joking about that and you're laughing and it is funny, but like in a vacuum, it's not the worst concept ever. Because Harden liked playing with Durant and didn't like playing with Kyrie. And
did he like playing with Durant?
Harden was fine playing with the Nets until Kyrie showed back up.
All I know is when Kyrie showed up, now granted, he showed up right as the whole team got hit by COVID. They were in first place by 3 games. They were doing just fine. But I mean, I think Embiid and Kyrie like each other. So, I mean, I agree. Daryl is Bontemps wrote, Daryl used to walk around with a shirt that said "Basketball Jesus" with Harden on it. That's not a guy he's given up, but that would be an amazing outcome. And he had to know when I'm like, you're on the list, right? I mean, he's not being traded for Matisse Thybulle. And I
mean, look, I don't know what to make of anything, but he at least has one more realistic option on the table than he did 6 hours ago. So
here's what I know. If he opts into his contract, the Lakers realistically cannot trade for him. The Nets are not taking Russell Westbrook. Sorry. The Clippers very likely cannot trade for him. There's a package there, but
I think to me, to your point, if Kyrie opts in, I think you assume he's going to be on the Nets next year. If he opts out, then we'll see what happens.
Just let me finish. The Heat were also mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Is Pat Riley taking Kyrie Irving?
I mean, I think he'd fit Heat culture.
Again, if I'm Pat Riley,
culture.
If I'm Pat Riley, I'm like, Kyrie, do whatever you got to do. And Kevin, when you get upset, my number is 305-777. That's actually his number. Dallas. Is he going to Dallas?
No.
If he is, his beard, the white spots are going to spread real quick.
He ain't going to Dallas. Look,
no,
like
and
I said,
the pathway to making that work, it would almost certainly have to be Brunson and to Brooklyn. Brunson would have to agree to that. It's
like I said,
I certainly have not sensed
all right, hold on,
desire in Dallas, but
right.
I do think there's one important person here who might be on board.
He might be.
I think there's one important person in Dallas who might be on board. I have not gotten a sense that it is anything remotely close to a consensus opinion. And they, like I said, they want to keep Jalen Brunson. That is plan A, priority number one.
The Nets also couldn't take Jalen in a sign and trade almost certainly because of the hard cap. So, I mean, it would require them to send out so much other money. I don't think that's even doable realistically.
Hey, no state income tax in Dallas, so in Texas. So you know what?
Look,
that $30 million pay cut wouldn't be so bad.
To your point, Brian, if Kyrie opts in, obviously he could get traded. It would open up more avenues in theory to get traded. But if he opts in, I think the assumption would be he's on the Nets next year, just based off of how game theory goes. If he opts out, then we'll see what happens.
Right. If he opts out, then he's taken a car service to Madison Square Garden and asking for a tour. All right. Thank you for listening to Hoop Collective Podcast. Thank you, Tim and Tim. Thank you to our producers for staying up late, Jackson and Bruce. And we will talk to you next week.
Adios, amigos.